Welcome to Organizational Sherlocks, the podcast where business meets psychology and your organizational puzzles meet their match.
Join us for captivating stories and practical solutions to unravel your toughest challenges.
I'm Dr. Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, your guides to a prescription for business success.
Let's dive in. Well, hello, listeners. Wonderful to have you with us here today. We are excited that Nick and Christian from Personos are here to talk with us about their organization and the way that it's used within the field of psychology, specifically IO psychology, and the world of coaching, which, as everyone knows, is really important to both Morgan and I. So if we can just jump in, Nick, Christian, can you just introduce yourselves, maybe tell us a little bit about you, and then maybe why you made this decision to jump into the world of AI platforms?
Absolutely. Thank you, Elizabeth, and thanks for having us. So I'm Nick. I'm one of the co-founders of Personos. I'm Colorado, born and raised, went to CU Boulder. I actually have a background in economics and political science. And then fresh out of college, went and joined a couple financial organizations, one being about 15,000 employees by now. And that's where we got exposed to actually seeing some of this personality psychology and your typical assessments that are out there and been there for decades. Really had a lot of interest in what this could be. And that's where, obviously knowing Christian for years, we came together and wanted to start something of our own and lead a company. I'll pass it over to Christian to finish that story.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm Christian. I also am from Colorado and currently live here. I went to University of Denver. Actually studied biology and business there, and then came out of school, learned how to code, fell in love with it, and have been doing software development or architecture for the past decade. Worked at different sizes of startups all along the scale. And yeah, we back at DU, actually, the inklings of this idea kind of started with one of the years we were there. I played a sport in college, and one of the years we had a student from Harvard who was getting his PhD in psychology, and then one of the adjunct professors come in and do team development work every single week for a full day instead of practice, which is a big cost. Our coach was, iffy to make that decision, but that year was actually the year we won the national championship, and you could the feeling of a team firing on all cylinders is just so different than not. And so getting, teams or organizations to work in a harmony and perfect synchrony is it always stuck with me. How could I implement something like this at scale? And it stuck with me forever, and there's not really a good way to do it. And then 2 years ago, when kind of this breakthrough in AI happened, I reached out to Nick and I was like, hey, I think this is the key to something around. We didn't know what it looked like yet or whatever, but I was like, there's something there that we could, actually implement something like this at scale now. And then that actually lined up perfectly with him. He came back from a multi-day disc training for his company where they sent him and his team and all those kind of, peers. And he came back and he was like, it was awesome. We loved it. Everyone was so excited. And then what he saw was the following week, everyone put that big packet they give you right into the bottom of their desk drawer, and nothing was ever implemented. And he was like, there's just got to be a better way. We're so pumped up about this, and you can see the value, the research is there and the science is there. And then, so that was the perfect timing, which, collided into this idea.
That is awesome. That is so not an uncommon thing, just so you know, to put the report in the bottom of your drawer. I can see Morgan laughing on camera right now, probably because
because I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen a lot in my day. And I mean, I can say I'm probably at fault for doing it as well, because sometimes when you're doing so much research, you have to prioritize what is the thing we're going to focus on. And so every so often I have my file, these are the important files and reports that we have and what are we going to work on. But then so often, I'm working with coaching or this or that, and the person just puts it in their drawer and I make them take it out constantly. I honestly do. I'm like, okay, hey, do you remember that training we did? Do you have your packet from that? Yeah, let's go over it and see how you're thinking about it now. Have you been applying these skills? But yeah, so I can imagine that, and it does happen very, very often.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. I've also done. I know Nick, you and I talked previously, but gone through the DISC trainings and insights discovery and facilitated those things. There's so many out there, right? And I think what I've noticed as kind of more of the one-on-one coach, although I do team development too, but one-on-one coaching is that people will leave like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited and I just want to like do something with it. And then they come back the next month and it goes, well, what did you do? What happened? And sometimes, not every time, but sometimes it just kind of fell to the wayside. And so that's the thing, like having messed around in Personos a little bit and kind of checked it out, that I think there's a really cool opportunity to integrate that as kind of a piece of the whole experience. And so I'm wondering if maybe you can tell us a little bit about what Personos looks like and what the experience is, maybe from a facilitator or coach's perspective, but also from a participant perspective, if you're okay. And that's not like too much IP that we're just throwing out there.
No, that's absolutely fine. I'm glad you asked. So you're right. It's very different. It's not a packet. You're not going to get 45 pages on paper anymore. That's kind of the benefit of what we're doing here is we are a newer company, and the folks that have been out there, credit to them, have been doing this for literally like 80 years.
Right.
So there was a simplification issue of you are going to walk away as a letter or a word or something that's very memorable, because the goal is to take that with you as you go into your day-to-day and work through some of the challenges you have. What's different about Personos is obviously the AI makes this applicable constantly to you, but more importantly, it takes the context of what you're actually facing into account. So instead of just saying, I'm an introvert, hope to get better at public speaking this year, it's here's where you are on an introverted scale. And then you can ask questions. Say, I have a big meeting this afternoon. I've never presented in front of this person and this person. How can I prepare for this specifically? And it's going to take all that science, work together the best possible answer, and start a conversation. So it is very conversational for the listeners to picture. And you can ask any question under the sun and say, how can I best approach this using my personality? And then it's team-based as well. So everyone's personalities are in there. They can tag, okay, I'm dealing with this person, or I'm asking this person a question. I'm nervous about it. How can I prepare? So that's definitely the flagship product, is how do we bring this into your exact situation? Then we also have reports. So just like we're talking about the big packets, we have all that information because we love it. Psychology is one of the most fascinating things about it. But what's really different and really important about that is there's AI inside of that whole thing as well. So you can share more context. You can talk about your goals. You can talk about your personal relationships. And these reports update in real time, taking into account your job description, what your company does, everything that you would want it to see, instead of just a captured, you're a sales team or you're an accounting team. We want it to be very specific and apply to people so that, again, they start changing their behavior and wanting to bring it to their day-to-day operations.
Yeah, I think that's critical. I've actually, so I'm not going to name it, but I had talked with a connection of mine who's trying to develop a similar system. Sounds like you guys might be a little bit farther ahead, obviously, and that's why you guys are on with us, thanks to Elizabeth and you guys. But when it comes to, that AI fit into your platform, obviously you said that you have the different personalities across the team in there. So what does it look like to embed this program into a company or into a team?
Yeah, so it's extremely simple. It's, less overhead than anything out there that currently exists. You just, implement into your org, you invite the, all the emails that are, part of teams, and they just take a 5-minute personality assessment, a version of the 5-factor model. And to start, it's the shortest, one. It's like a 60-question one. It takes, somewhere from 5 to 10 minutes. And then right then and there, your personalities are in there, and you can just go into work generating reports or using the tool like on the spot. And so doesn't need to be the half-day training necessarily. There's plenty of value for the individual team members. Now, what we've already started to see is still at the higher levels, you still want that coaching because they don't even know the right questions to ask yet. And so that's where a ton of the value comes in, especially for coaches and whatnot, is it's like with, kind of software and AI. What's happening with AI and software right now is, I don't know if you guys seen anything, but it's learning how to write a lot of code. Right. Which is, I think that's awesome. But a lot of people get a little nervous about it. But the where people don't understand is what it enables you to do is the low level writing of the code is what you actually don't like about your job necessarily. That's the part that I didn't like. You like the higher level decisions. You like the important stuff. You like the strategic stuff. That's the stuff that actually engages you. And that's where you're able to provide more values, because you're able to do more of that and less of digging into the report as a coach or something and going, hey, he's a 0.65 in, agreeableness. So I'm going to think that he does, X, Y, and Z, or might react this way. Now you can just say, okay, AI, that's what it's good at. Synthesize all this data. And this is what I'm thinking. Are one of these three options good? And it might say, hey, maybe do X or Y, not Z, or vice versa. And so that's kind of how it takes 5 minutes to just hop in there, get your organization in there, but you can go into as much depth as you want and continue to dig deeper.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, Elizabeth and I have talked about AI in the past, and oftentimes it's almost the idea of like scripting in a way. It's like supposed to speed up the scripting. So those ideas that, sometimes someone has to really think on it for a couple of days of how am I going to approach this, or how do these pieces all connect? Some people might be able to do more quickly. Some people might not be able to do it at all. And so AI then kind of fills in that skill set and speed up the process. So I think that's really great that you've touched on that. And Christian, you say not everybody likes the coding. Well, that's why you exist in the company, I'm sure, because you're the one that likes the coding, you're the one that's good at it. And that's why it's so important to have people with different interests and different skill sets across an organization.
Yeah. It's funny. I think I've mentioned on the podcast, my partner is in technology as well. And so the coding perspective, I try to look at it and try to understand it. There are times I can do some low code stuff, but anything super complicated, there's just, it's over my head. So
I just know the legality of coding. I don't know coding.
Yeah. AI comes in handy there though, because sometimes I'm like, what's wrong with my, when I'm building a website or something, what's wrong with my code? Where did I screw up? And then sometimes it can help, which is kind of cool. So anyway, we're not here talking about coding, although I think Christian, we probably could do that on another episode too. But I do want to, for our listeners, I know many are probably familiar. You had mentioned, Christian, the Big Five, or maybe it was you, Nick, that the personality test is based on the Big Five. And just for our listeners who aren't sure what that is, it is the ocean or the canoe. I like the canoe because it sounds fun. Model of personality. So openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So I just wanted to throw that out there. It's a great theory and has been researched a lot and is also pretty universal, which I really appreciate. So I'm glad that you went down that path. There's some good and some bad out there. And so I'm glad you went down that path and really did your research.
Yeah, and I feel the Big Five is critical because they have the Big Five in existence because that's what they see across languages and across cultures. And so just to emphasize that, and I do like to point out, Elizabeth likes the canoe model, but she just used the ocean version of it when she was talking about it.
So here's the thing, when I've taught it, I always say it in the ocean, acronym, but I like canoes because I like canoeing. So I have to, it's maybe that's a sign of my personality. We should put that into Personos and see what it says. Just kidding. Okay, anyway, sorry. I'm really good at going on tangents. So when you so we've talked a little bit about kind of how it would look like in a team environment. How do you integrate coaches into this? How do you envision coaches using this to enhance what they already do? I guess, if that's a fair question.
That's a great question. Yeah. And just kind of conceptually, Personos is, like Christian alluded to, it's AI that's going to help you with some of the mundane tasks. But the last step with our entire process, start to finish, is still a human-to-human connection. So somebody needs to deliver the message or the advice that somebody gets. They still need to, execute on it, which allows us to start easing into this world of AI. And we're doing the same thing for coaches, where essentially we're enabling them to have a tool and deeper insights so that they're not flipping through pages and packets and spending all night trying to do research to come up with something insightful. Instead, we're going to give them what is called the coaching report. So I alluded to those reports earlier. Once a coachee approves the coach to have access to their information a little bit deeper, nothing too personal or anything like that, they're going to get a report that's built out on some major themes like company goals, value to the organization, different aspects that would really come into a coaching conversation. And then there's also a coaching chat feature. So as you're in that chat, those same insights and that same second layer of understanding is going to come in for the coach when speaking and tagging that coachee. So we really just want to make sure that they have every piece of information they can need at their fingertips and keeping those conversations rolling. We know it's hard to talk to somebody that you're coaching every single week and come up with something new. We like to keep things fresh. We want them to be excited and come in new every time. And then they can also document how they coach. What's the coaching environment? What are the past coaching notes we learned from? Keeping it growth oriented. It's really trying to be a companion, because we do know that coaching relationship is extremely valuable.
Yeah.
I really like that you note the documentation portion of it, because I feel that in general, AI systems or coaching systems, too often you lose that, where you kind of just move on from it and you don't necessarily have all of the past documentation unless you purposefully downloaded it and saved it elsewhere. And so I really like to hear that you have a documentation part of your program. And I think that also, continues to support the AI, because you have all the past history there, which then continues to build top itself, to really, make the coaching for this person unique, and also make that person's coaching style for the coach themselves, really continues to build upon that and teaches them how to coach. I know Elizabeth and I have in the past have said, not only do mentees learn from a mentorship, but mentors learn from a mentorship too.
That's a really good point. Yeah, and what's interesting too is we don't see the coaching journey as having a start and finish. There's a lot of times we've seen that in the past of, okay, I went through my 12 modules and we're done, and I hope you're at where you want to be in your career. What's nice is it constantly adopts. And then to your point, Morgan, most coaches and really good coaches have their own style. It's proprietary, or they're trained by ICF or IPEC, whatever it is, they have a style that we want to resonate throughout the system. We want it to sound like them. We want it to be genuine and human.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's so important. What's going through my mind right now, maybe I'll put you on the spot a little bit if that's okay. Oh gosh, I do that a lot. Anyway, I keep hearing this, like, AI, you might replace my job, or AI this, AI that. And I love the way that you both describe the message of kind of what you're trying to do. It's not about AI replacing your job, right? So where I'm putting you on the spot is to say, what would you say to people who are worried about that? Because there are quite a few people out there that this conversation is happening.
Yeah. I love this kind of topic in general, because you see it a ton in software right now. That's like a huge concern, because AIs are getting really good at that because there's a ton of data on that. But in terms of, kind of the space we're in, I would say, like, part of the reason we chose this idea, we wouldn't have chosen this idea necessarily if we thought that this part, like the human part of working or teams or whatever, was able to, take, like, AI could take its job. If you look into, like, if you think 5 years down the future, maybe 10 years down the road, in terms of how AI gets put in throughout organizations, what it actually will do is, like, take away a lot of the, like, base level, like, rudimentary stuff. So it's going to, like, we won't have to input stuff into spreadsheets anymore. The raw coding, like the actual low level code, you won't have to do that anymore. Maybe research on a customer, you might not have to do that anymore. That's where it's going to take, all those kind of like solo tasks away or speed them up drastically. And what that does is also levels the playing field across, the industry. So if company A has access to these AI tools, so does company B. And so you're going to kind of level the playing field there. And so, which means that more of our time is actually going to be spent in the value that, the competitive advantages that one organization might have over the other is the human to human part, the team development part, how you collaborate, how you make decisions together. So that'll actually be where we provide more value than before, is the human to human parts. And that's what we're designed to facilitate and enhance and add to. And so I actually see it as, especially with most people's jobs, it won't take your job. It'll make certain parts of your job easier. You'll be able to do more of it. You'll do it faster. And then other parts of your job will become more valuable. And one of those parts is the human to human part, because that can't be automated.
Right. I love that, because I think I told Nick in our conversation, like, I use AI all the time. I will give you a perfect example of that. I had to plan my entire summer for my children and their care and sports and music and all of the things that they do. And typically that would take me a few weeks to, like, get it all down. And I went into AI, an AI program, and I said, like, here are all of the activities I have, build me a calendar. and it did it in 10 minutes. There were a few errors, but that's okay. I figured it out. And so, yeah, like that kind of stuff. I mean, it saved me so much time. And I think about, working in the coaching space, how much time, like you said, I take before each coaching session to do some research, to try to be really super creative about, what kind of homework assignment or, can I talk to them about, and to have something there to kind of help bolster that, give me ideas that maybe I haven't thought about, but because maybe other people have, or whatever it is. I think there's a lot of value in that. And that's one of the things in kind of going in there and checking it out, I was really excited about, for sure.
Yeah,
So.
I think, Elizabeth, you just noted like there were some errors, so you had to fix those errors, and that's the idea that there has to still be a human component with AI. So Christian, Nick, I'd love you to talk about, is it possible that your system might throw an error and then, that coach needs to catch it? Or would you say it's more so almost option based? I know, Christian, you talked about like those 3 options, and it's like, which one is the best option? The coach has to kind of move forward with it. So tell me a little bit about how you would approach people with the concern of, could there be errors that come out of the AI system when you are utilizing it?
Yeah, that's a great scenario, or a huge concern of ours when we were initially building it was, okay, what level of accuracy are we getting here? And with something as complex as the 5-factor model, you alluded to the main ones earlier, and it's 30 sub-facets between those 6, major factors. And then each one of those is on a scale of like, 0 to 100 essentially. And so you have like an unlimited amount of personalities that you could actually be, whereas like each personality is truly unique. And so our concern was like, okay, we're like, is it going to be good at actually analyzing all this, making, the right assumptions, or the right, I guess like providing the right information or the right diagnosis to the coach or the team member. And what we've seen is actually, in terms of like the accuracy of how it's analyzing the personalities and how they might fit together, it's phenomenal. Like, we have yet to have somebody come and say, hey, give me this really bad, potential advice,
Right.
which is awesome. It blew us out of the water. Even anecdotally, we use it all the time. My wife and I just had a baby a couple months ago. And so we've had conversations recently where it's like, okay, we'd, have serious conversations because it's obviously very, very difficult. And after one of them, she goes, okay, this is really funny. I actually use Personos to help me with, having this conversation. And I was like, okay, can I read it? And she was like, yeah, sure. And we read through it, and it's uncanny how accurate it is in terms of, hey, he might, you might want to address these 4 concerns when you're talking about this, because these are probably what's going to, pop into his mind. You might want to deliver the message in this way because, he's going to receive it really poorly if you do it this other way, type things. And we went through, and out of the 7 points it listed that I might bring up as concerns, like I think I brought up like 5 of them. And it's like, so it's uncanny in how like accurate it is. And it's really cool to see that. But where we talk about how, so it's great at the complexity part. In terms of the human nuance part, that's where it's so important to have the person in the loop. So you might say, like, let's say you're coaching and you say, okay, with this, client, they're about to, prepare for this type of situation, or this is the situation I'm trying to prepare them for or work on. What is, things I should look out for? What are ideas to help prepare? It avoids giving you an actual, just like, do this. It's a, hey, here's the information you need to make your decision. You understand the human nuance to it. You still know this person from like a non-raw number standpoint better than the system will at any point. And so you're still the one that's able to go, okay, I think, A will work. It's just conversational. It's not truly optional. It just tends to output multiple potential solutions or ways you might go about something when you ask it a question. So it'll usually avoid just saying, do A. It's like, okay, given X, Y, and Z, these are 3 things you might want to watch out for. These 3 ideas you might want to try implementing. And then the human's in the one there that goes back and forth with it. And it's really meant as a collaborative tool to go, okay, A will work, B won't. What are ideas on, or like, how should I start implementing that? How will this person receive this? What are things I should look out for? So it's really meant as like, you understand the nuance, whereas it deals with the complexity.
Yeah, that's really interesting. it makes me think a little bit of like change management in some ways too, like kind of the buy-in part of it, because I mean, I think we probably all have been there at one time or another where somebody says, well, it's this, or the solution is so easy, just go do this thing. And you go, but that's really scary. And I don't want to do that. And I'm not ready for that. Right. So to have options, like there may be, option A, maybe I'm not quite there yet. Like in my development, I need to come back to that one later, but option B might be something I can try right now. So I like that it's kind of the, like you said, it's the people side, and kind of, I think in some ways is also, building that both confidence that like I have choice and I can choose how I show up, while also building skills at the same time. Because I know that a lot of the conversations I have like with my students and stuff is around AI use, and if it's going to eliminate our ability to critically think about things. And my argument is no, I think it just changes how we critically think about things. It's not like when we had dial-up internet long ago and we had to figure out where we were going to find all this information. Like we have all this information at our fingertips. And so now the critical thinking, in my view, is more about how we sift through it and make sense of it and identify patterns and identify errors and all of those things. And I think that in itself is a tool for growth. So by giving options, long-winded way to say, by giving options, I think it's building that critical thinking capacity that somebody needs, and hopefully will be able to apply real time in the future. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I feel like that alludes to some of the conversations we had back in like episode 15, 16, 17 of season 2 here, where we were talking about those tips and tricks for change management and building buy-in. Sometimes it's really hard as like the coach, for example, like if we're doing this in a more manual format without AI, to sit back and say, hey, why don't you like ask the questions to help them figure it out and like let them trial and error in a way. But at the same time, we talked about giving options to build buy-in. Like, this has to get done. It has to get done more quickly. So you give those options. And Christian, you put it in a really good way where, my concern at one point in time when we were talking was, well, what about emotional intelligence? Is this going to decrease people's capacity for emotional intelligence because it's almost creating too quick of a conclusion or options in a way? But I feel that it's not. Again, as Elizabeth said, we're building upon our current critical thinking skills. And while we all want to say that we all have the highest level of emotional intelligence, I'm sure many of us can note that we see deficits across the board. I know team members. I have team members that I'm sometimes like, you didn't understand that with the customer. You didn't understand that with the customer. Like you couldn't approach this in a different way. And so in that way, it's honestly teaching them to become more emotionally intelligent. And then, AI is more so going to elevate the human experience for critical thinking. It's going to give us that scripted, the more, I guess, basic knowledge in a way more quickly. And then we're going to be able to develop on top of that. I hear about professors utilizing AI in a new way, saying, okay, write a paper with AI, and then you're going to come and finish it here in class, and you're going to do it here with me, like kind of overseeing you, seeing how you build upon this paper. And so in that way, that sounds like what you're implementing with Personos is it's options. It's, hey, look out for these things, but these things might not actually occur, but they could. Again, it's making them see what's potential, but then making them decide for themselves.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And Morgan, one thing you mentioned earlier on was the change management. A really important aspect of that is asking questions. Yeah. And you'll see in most AI tools, especially the larger ones, if you ask it for something, it's going to give you an answer because it's the best user experience. What's different with what Christian built was that Personas will ask you a question if it's necessary. So if you don't provide enough information to give a reasonable answer, like if I called you, Morgan, I'm like, hey, I have a financial problem. You can't just solve that without asking, okay, what is it? Is it your 401k? Is it your checking account? It's built to ask questions to give you the best possible advice. So it knows the whole scenario. Again, it's that adding context element. So
and it's conversational. So it's almost more bite-sized than bite-sized pieces for the people too.
Exactly right. And it's private too. It's an important detail is that all of these conversations you're having, there isn't a chain of hierarchy where your boss is looking at what you're doing. There's ways to obviously quantify and see, enterprise usage and that type of thing. But these conversations you're having with the tool are not publicly visible, nor are your personality scores. So you can't say, what's my boss's conscientiousness score? I'd love to start utilizing that to get ahead in life. it's going to
Yeah.
stop there, and there are rules and guidelines, so it's a safe tool as well.
Yeah.
I like that too, because it also, so it will utilize the information to help someone problem solve, but won't give the information. And so again, it builds that emotional intelligence of maybe they can, as they're, working with their boss more, or they're working with that person more, they might be able to deduce what those personalities, sets might look like roughly. I know I sometimes will joke, I'll talk with somebody and I'll give them their like rough estimate, like between this percentage and this percentage of all of the big five. And then I make them take personality tests. I'm usually correct. And so it's pretty funny because it would be able to develop that in a way of not just noticing it in the people you're working with and utilizing the system to problem solve with, but also new people at that point in time. So it's really building that personality psychology skill set.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You're supporting, Morgan, the thing that drives me crazy about my family and what they say to me about being in psychology. They always tell people, well, she just analyzes people all the time. And it's not true. I don't do that all the time, but I am pretty good at picking out where people might fall on, on a spectrum of some kind of personality.
I tell people I'm analyzing them all the time.
I'm not going to let my family listen to this episode, only because of that. I just acknowledged the thing that drives me nuts. Anyway, but one of the things I think, Nick, when you and I talked before, you had mentioned that I found to be a very important part here. I know you said that it's private, right? You can't go and find out your boss's score, but if your boss chooses to share with you certain things, they can, right? Or your coach can kind of log into, like if Morgan is my coachee, I can log in and kind of see what's going on in the meantime. Is that true?
Yes, so that's true. And that comes from the coaching tool itself. The step to become a coach is just simply consent. So you'll send your coachee request to be a coach relationship, and they just approve it. And again, it's just consenting to have that next level of information. It's all about what people are comfortable with. But once they are able to peek behind the curtain just a little bit more, the coaching insights become invaluable.
Yeah. I think that is so important and so cool. I mean, I think because, okay, so one of the things that I've experienced just in like the more traditional coaching sense is, again, like people will come to the next session. I'll say, okay, so we talked about this last time, do you have any examples when something came up, or let's go through it, and what we know about memory, right, is memory is, as much as we like to think we have rock solid memory, it's not true. Our brain changes things. It changes things to fit our own narratives, all that kind of stuff. And so we sometimes lose some of those important details about a situation that happened before. And so I think having that documentation, like we talked about, having some of that insight, trying to understand, it gives you more of a real-time look about like what was actually happening. So then you can say, you went back, you went into Personos and we're curious about this situation. Let's talk about that situation, where in a traditional sense, I'm not sure that would always come up. I mean, I encourage people to write things down, like if something happens, but again, we're human and we don't always do that. So I enjoyed that part of it a lot. So there's no question there, but.
And I have a question, not to backtrack, but I am going to backtrack. My question was, so Nick, you were talking about, the confidentiality. Well, I have a question on, AI typically builds upon itself in most scenarios. And so is it possible that the AI system kind of builds upon itself and learns from itself within the different individuals that are using it? And if so, how do you protect, like, for example, IP? Like, what if a person's talking about IP within the system? Is that something that becomes public knowledge, or does it remain private?
So I can take this one. The in terms of learning over time, like how it builds upon itself, that is like a really cool aspect of it and really useful in terms of users. And that's something I'm actually working on right now, is actually for it to have essentially memory on a individual relationship level and a personal level too. So it's like if you're, if a coach is having, issues with a specific client and you kind of see it over time, it'll remember what you were talking about the last time. And so like, it'll know that, okay, you were, working on this last time or struggling with this or whatever it was, and allow you to build up upon that in the future. And so that's a really cool and useful aspect in terms of like privacy from a, potential IP or securities type standpoint. One thing we've seen so far is like, it's less of a concern. It's always a concern at the beginning when, you're getting this into an organization. That's a big, like, oh, what if someone puts something, a trade secret in there? And the reality is, like, this is very different from kind of like ChatGPT and stuff, in that, like, it doesn't really invite that at all. Like, it's meant for, like, a specific, human interaction or things. And so people tend to, like, we were even surprised that, like, the people don't have those conversations with Personos. But in terms of, like, privacy and security, it does, like, we have everything that, we possibly can, from, the tools we use, the LLMs that we build on, don't use any of the data we do to train. Everything's anonymized before it even gets saved into, the database and sent over there, and all those kind of things. Names are never included with the message. Like, everything from top to bottom we do to be safe. But we've also found that in practice, team members and stuff don't think to, or don't want to put, like, trade secrets in there or talk about those kind of things, just because it's so not built for that. It's just built for the human to human interaction piece.
Yeah. When I think just historically too, I mean, I can't say this is true for everyone, but I mean, prior to AI and even just advances in technology, I mean, we've always been told, right? Don't put IP in whatever, like about our own privacy, like our own practices and privacy. I know when I was in the mental health world, it was, if you have client files before electronic health records, if you have these files, like, don't put them in your trunk, like, that's not a good choice. And, stuff like that. And so I think for some people, maybe not all, but for a lot of people, I think that's already just baked into their habits. So I can't imagine they would go on and say, let me just tell you all of my secrets, AI, because it's already just kind of baked into our world.
Yeah, and that's a good point.
I mean?
There's one piece of actual functionality too in there, where if you mention certain aspects of your job, like if you say embezzlement or fraud or something that we as personas really shouldn't touch on, this is a bigger company issue.
Right.
It won't apply to that. It's not going to touch that. And then there's also the element, which is really cool actually, in terms of getting this to enterprises. These companies have really strong beliefs. Almost all of them have values. They have operating procedures. They have, things they believe, like the customer's always right. We can upload that into the system, into the AI. So then it becomes the LLM plus personality psychology plus what this company believes.
Yep.
You can do the same thing for coaching as well, like I alluded to earlier. We really want this to sound like a piece of a company.
Yeah, that's really important. That context is, I think, one of the most important pieces. Just in general. And I think a lot of, like, sometimes that's missed, and I wish that everyone would just consider the context. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Morgan, we're going to say something. I feel like I interrupted you again.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good. I'm actually listening along. I think our conversation, our listeners are certainly learning a lot. I feel Elizabeth and I are also learning a lot. Seems you guys have really built up this program with, all the safeguards in place, first off, that anyone would have concerns on. You can obviously hear me asking about a lot of those. That's what our listeners are probably thinking. But second to that, you really have embedded psychology into it, and have built that idea of emotional intelligence. And while other AI systems try to do that, I don't feel that they do them as, strongly as it sounds like Personos is, because you guys are building teams, like all the team's personalities are in there. And so within that, the team is more successful. It does make me think of one question though, of, for example, like a sales team, they're constantly working with customers. Customers' personalities aren't in the system. Is it possible for Personas to help a sales rep work through a situation with a person that might not be in the system?
Yes. No, go ahead, Christian. You can explain that.
Yeah, it is. It's like, obviously the perfect use case is meant for internal teams, right? It has all their personalities. You can even create groups or teams in there. And so you tag, the Northeast sales team, and it includes everyone's personalities in an instant, and you can utilize that. But it's still very useful when working outside, known personalities. So, because it still knows your personality. So let's say I was like a sales team or a sales member, and I was reaching out to a client, or I had this big client that I work with constantly. There's two ways you can go about it. One, you could just, throw in the conversation, hey, I'm working with Steve, and, he is questioning, or like, iffy on this topic. How do I deliver it to him in the right way? And something like that will, take your personality and maybe what are you going to be best at to deliver it to him. It'll also ask you questions of like, okay, tell me just a little bit about Steve. Like, okay, maybe he's an old school guy, resistant to change X, Y, and Z. And then it'll still give you, more options and collaborate with you back and forth to where it helps you get to the answer you want, even with an external client. The other way you can do it is if it's somebody that like you're going to be, maybe outside the organization that you work with a lot, you can create like a relationship with them essentially. And whether they are on Personos or not, you could add context about that individual. So then you can keep tagging it in future conversations, and it would like you just add context about them once, everything you know about them, and then it'll utilize that when you're asking it questions about that person. So it's still very useful, even though it's really cool and really good with like the raw personality scores and leveraging all that, it can still be useful even if it just has your half of the personality scores, your information, and then any information you add about the customer.
Yeah, and I would argue that even if it's not a perfect use scenario, it's still more effective than if you weren't using the system at all, because now it's making you consciously, note things about this person. It's making you really call it to attention, which one builds their critical thinking skills, but two, obviously is informing the system. And then that system, yes, as you said, it's going to work with their personality and the information it receives to give feedback. And, you talked about in the system, it's not going to give you a direct, this is what you're going to do. It's going to say, watch out for these, and these are some options that you might take for your approach. And so in that way, though it's not perfect use, it's going to continue to put out what it's doing despite not having a personality score on one side.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly right.
Well, I think it expands your thinking too. You might not have considered other things or taken the time to really try to understand someone. So if it's like a kind of a tool to force you into doing that too.
Yeah.
So, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, we've talked about let me just say this quick, Elizabeth, and I'll let you get to your question. But we've talked about the confirmation bias, where people tend to only confirm their thoughts. And so I feel it's really critical that this system itself will challenge those thoughts in real time without forcing the person to go out and try to figure out thoughts contrary to their own. We're all biased to ourselves. And so it's harder to argue against yourself than it is to utilize a system that's coaching you to do so.
Yeah,
Certainly.
absolutely. Well, I'm just curious because, obviously I'm looking into all of this and have been in there, but how can people experience Personos, or how can they, whether it's a user, maybe someone looking for a coach or starting up a coaching engagement or whatever it may be, how can they get access to Personos and learn more about it?
Yeah, great question. So right on the website, you can just jump on there and start a free trial individually. And funny enough, when you go in there, it's called demo data, and it's going to simulate what it's like to have your full team on there. So you drop into the world of Dunder Mifflin's, you'll have Dwight Schrute and Andy Bernard and all your friends in there. It shows what it's like to have a group relationship, personal relationship. You can start to look at the reports and start to tag people and see what that's all like. And then, as you continue to tag Dwight in this chat, you're starting to wonder, I'd love to actually start tagging Elizabeth and Morgan instead. And see what it's like my real people. So it's a great simulation to get a feel for it. And then adding people. So if you really do want to expand that network, like Christian alluded to, there's just simply an add relationship button. First name, last name, email, they get their assessment and they get pulled into your network. So it's a good way to just jump in there and get a feel for it. It's free for coaches. So anyone who's in the coaching space, it's going to be free for them and free for whoever they coach ongoing. There's no catch there, which again, we really support the coaching community. Want to see more of that and learn more from it. The more use cases we hear, the better, the stronger the system becomes. And then for anyone who wants to bring on, full organization, great, give me a call. Or you can even sell it to, again, like individual sales teams within organizations. The setup is literally so quick and easy that it's very accessible to bring in, again, a smaller group of a big company, unless you want to do the full company. Like I said, give me a call.
Yeah, that's awesome. I will tell you that when I logged in, that was the first thing I noticed was the Office references, and I appreciated that. It's like a sign of a really good company who has the humor and like the love for that whatever, that show. I just love it so much. I actually showed the entire first episode to my class in a consulting class, and I had them look at like if they were a consultant coming in to work on team development, what would they do, or what would they pay attention to? And I kind of forgot. There's a few parts that are pretty offensive, which I kind of forgot because it's been a long time since I watched the first episode. But such a good show.
Yeah.
I think that was the one with the Jello too, where they're everything in Jello, like the stapler in Jello and all of that. God, such a good episode. Okay, anyway, now I know what I'm doing this afternoon. I'm gonna go and probably watch all this. So well, this is really exciting. We appreciate you guys so much. I'm excited to see where the company goes. I do want to say one other thing though, because I want to call out the fact that for our listeners who are thinking, well, how can I expand my world of work and all of that? You have someone a consultant, a psychologist who consulted with you on the psychological aspects of this. Yeah. I can't remember her name. I'm sorry. But I think that is so important. And I say that because that's an opportunity that I would imagine this is probably not her full-time job, right? She probably has another gig on the side too. And I think that's just really important that there are collaborations that can happen that can create something so beautiful and wonderful. And so if you have knowledge or a passion, and even if it's not your full-time job, don't be afraid to make those connections with people because you never know where it can go. Personos, I think, is a perfect example of a collaboration in that way, which is really cool. So I just wanted to call that out.
That's a good point. You can call us. We'll take all the advice we can get. It's really nice to see because there are so many outputs that come from Personos. It's great to have eyes on it from the professionals. And our psychologist that we work with, she has a whole firm, and it's always nerve-wracking, but we check in with them to say, is this accurate? Is this something you do? Because Christian and I come from different spaces of human capital and business leadership and that type of thing, but we want the psychology to really be there.
Yeah. It seems like a very holistic, kind of well-rounded, and you guys have thought about a lot of the pieces. So thank you for putting this together. I'm sure it was a labor of love, and you're here, and it's really cool, and it's going to continue to change. So is there anything else that I know we've talked about a lot of different topics today, but is there anything else that you think of, or you can think of, that you really want our listeners to know, to understand, or anything else?
Yes, I mean, going back to the psychology concept of it, is what we're seeing so far in some of our big observations is that people really do appreciate personality psychology. A lot of times we bring it up to people, be like, oh yeah, I did a so-and-so assessment a couple of years ago. I think I'm a blue triangle or something like that. It was really cool, but I don't remember. What we're starting to see is people are seeing this as a true science, and they're bringing it to their day-to-day operations, they're bringing it to work, then they're bringing it home and working with their spouse and that type of thing. So it's really fascinating to see that way. Another big observation we've had so far is that these work relationships, if you scroll through LinkedIn, everyone will say, don't mix your work life and your personal life, and there's boundaries. And of course, that's true. But in the user cases we've seen so far with Personos, those relationships really matter. People care. The friction that's there stresses them out. The friendships and relationships that they make mean a lot to them. So it's a big deal to see that from people.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's kind of interesting. I'll have to send this to you. I'm doing a webinar in a couple of days around the personal professional and that.
Nice.
So I'll send it to you if you're interested. It's free, so you can join. Anyway, plug for that, I guess. I didn't intend to do that. But, well, thank you both so much. Christian, is there anything that you wanted to add on kind of final thoughts?
No, I mean, I thank you guys for having us on. I love it, and I love to get the buy-in of this community. At least check it out at personos.ai, and then let us know feedback. There's a support button in the menu, and you just send us whatever you think. If you've tested it out and you either like it or don't like it, we're constantly listening for that stuff, and we will build with that stuff in mind. So check it out and let us know what you think.
Awesome. And for our listeners, we will put a link to the website in our socials. So make sure you check it out on Instagram or LinkedIn, wherever you kind of find us, and we will get that access to you. So with that, maybe we wrap it up today, Morgan? Does that sound good?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Well, everyone, this concludes another intriguing episode of Organizational Sherlocks. I'm Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, reminding you that the journey to success is an ongoing investigation.
As always, remember to stay curious, stay strategic, and keep utilizing insights to decode your business mysteries.
Join us every Tuesday for your next Who Done It. This is Organizational Sherlocks closing today's case.
We'll see you next time.